This is part two of our two-part series where we review the home buyer presentation. In this section, we're going to discuss the buyer representation agreement. We're going to break it down for you so you can see how we describe it to a buyer. Now, this is an Ohio representation agreement, so follow whatever your state provides. Our buyer representation agreement. Try not to fall asleep, but I'll go through the important parts. Usually it's a 90-day agreement. We talk about that here. I'm going to go through my obligations and your obligations. It's pretty basic stuff. And by the way, if you wake up one day and you say, Will's not returning phone calls, he's not responding to texts, we haven't heard from him, I'm going to put a provision in here that says that if that happens, you can void this agreement. Because the last thing I'm going to use this as is handcuffs. Because if we're not working well together, I've been doing this a long time. I haven't been fired in years, but I probably let go 3 or 4 buyers a year. If we're not on the same page or people start getting weird, I just want a friendly, happy relationship. So this is my job, and my number one focus is to protect you and your wife's best interests, but I'm just telling you where I stand. This will never be handcuffs. I'm not going to drag anyone through the process. They either want to do it or they don't. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's why we've got so many reviews online. So our duties to you. Agent agrees to use diligence and professional skills and knowledge within the scope of agent's expertise to assist the buyer in locating real property and shall act solely in the best interest of the buyer. So we're representing you in negotiating for buyer's purchase or acquisition. This just says a member of the National Association of Realtors, agent is bound by the relevant duties and responsibilities set forth in Realtor Code of Ethics. I mean, obviously you expect us to be ethical. We have a fiduciary obligation to represent you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your obligation. During the term of this agreement, buyer agrees to use a brokerage and agent exclusively in buyer's search for such real property and for all subsequent negotiations for its purchase or acquisition. What this means is, unlike buying a car, where you go from lot to lot until you find what you want, our entire system in the United States is designed so that you can work with one real estate agent and we can show you any home on the market.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
That's how it
I had
works.
to go directly to the other listing agents because that's what I've done in the past.
Well, no, I mean, the reason we're having this meeting today is because, this market is very fast paced, and having somebody in your corner throughout the process to make sure that you don't make stupid mistakes, which ultimately cost you money and stress. I mean, you got young kids and a wife and a job. The last thing you need is this creating more issues for you. So you are hiring us exclusively, but we've already discussed that. If anything, if I don't do my job, then I'm going to have a provision here that says you can fire me, and vice versa. If either one of us aren't happy, we can shred this thing. Buyer agrees to cooperate, including promptly providing agent with any pertinent information requested by agent and not interfere with the agent's efforts to accomplish the purpose set forth in this agreement. I mean, basically, again, we're cooperating with each other to achieve your ultimate goal of buying a home for your family. Buyer represents that they have not entered into any other buyer agent contracts that would be in conflict with this agreement. You can't hire more than one agent at the same time. That's pretty much what this says. But again, there's no reason to. As long as you've got an agent who you trust, who is competent, who has a lot of experience, then you can look at any home listed through any real estate company on the market.
Okay.
You understand the possibility that dual agency situation would exist in the event the buyer would purchase one of the agent's own listings. So if by chance you do a 180 and you say, hey, I want to look at this house over here in this town, and it happens to be listed by me, well, then that dual agency, what that means is I can't tell the seller anything that you told me that is confidential in nature, and I can't tell you anything that the seller has told me that is confidential in nature. And you will know about it in advance. So if a dual agency situation pops up, I'm going to let you know and say, hey, I have that house listed. It's going to have to be dual agency. So you're going to be fully aware. It doesn't happen very often. But most buyers don't want to have to void their agreement with their agent, go find another one, right? Just so that and then miss out on a house. So on the odd chance that we have a house listed, I'll let you know in advance.
Okay.
All right. Buyer acknowledges and consents to the agent simultaneously working with other parties, and it's possibility that another such purchaser or party would also be interested in the same property. What this means is we have several buyers that we work with. there's a chance that we would have one that's also looking at the same house you do. I've only had it happen one time in my whole career, but if it happens again, I'll just let you know, by the way, we've got another buyer looking at this house. So I'm going to be very forthright with you.
Awesome.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Now we're going to go through compensation. As are you aware of the changes that have you seen any of these headlines?
Yeah, I've been seeing a bunch of things and I'm not really sure like what that means and how does that impact us other than, I guess I'm gonna have to pay you.
Well, not necessarily. So basically, for the last 60 years, when a house goes on the market in the multiple listing service, which is a database, it's like a lake with all the fish in it. It's a database with all the homes in it through all the real estate companies in the area. Okay. So basically, when a home goes on the market, the listing agent agreed to pay a portion of their fee that they collect from the seller to any successful buyer agent that would procure a buyer on the sale of their property. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. That is still allowed. We're just not, they're not allowed to put that amount in the multiple listing service. So now what happens? Here's how I get paid. We have a small fee that you're going to pay us. That varies. A lot of brokers charge a small fee to the buyer at closing. Not a big deal. It's usually in the hundreds of dollars. Where we make our real money, though, is usually it's going to be in the 2.5 to 3% of the sale price. And the listing agent for many years paid us that directly so that we didn't even have to have a conversation with you about it. The only thing that's really changed is that we just now have to have more open communication, because most of the time when we look at a house, I'm going to contact them to make sure that they're cooperating and compensating buyer agents. If one of the homes that you want to see where they're not, then all that means is that we're going to have to write on the contract that they're agreeing to pay the fee that you're agreeing to pay us on your behalf. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's three options.
Okay.
The seller agent will pay us, no big deal.
Okay.
If they aren't agreeing, then we have to ask for it. Okay, so we're just going to ask for that fee to be paid on the contract, no big deal.
Hmm.
On the odd chance they absolutely refuse to do that, I'm probably going to know that before we see the house. So then you're going to get to decide, are you going to pay us 2% of the sale price, or are you going to miss out on the house? Usually, though, it's going to be one of the first two. It's not common where they're just going to flat out refuse to pay a buyer agent, because the reality of the matter is sellers depend on attracting all the realtors in the area, because 90% of the buyers are working with an agent just like you are, because you want to be represented. You want to have somebody in your corner. All
Yeah,
right.
so what are you gonna fill in under number five? Are you
Number five, I'm just put our $495 fee,
okay?
and then I'm going to put 2 to 3% here. So we'll take a minimum of 2% from the listing agent, up to 3%, whatever they're offering. Okay. And then
And
down here,
what let's say so Will, before you go, like what if they don't want to pay anything and I really like the house? I mean, what if I can't pay you the 2% or the 3%, whatever you're gonna write in there?
up to this point, I haven't had a buyer have to pay me directly. Usually what happens is they're either going to agree to pay us, or we're going to negotiate it on the purchase agreement. And by the way, every buyer out there is in the same boat you are.
Okay.
It's not like this is just
Yeah,
you
I'm just a
and
little
me.
bit worried because I'm looking at my finances. We're talking about 5% down,
Absolutely.
and then another closing cost. So let's if I say I'm in it for 10%, and then I'm pretty much tapped out. So another 3% on top of that. I mean, we're talking about, gosh, if I'm just going off of 3% off of our top end of our budget, we're talking about another
$24,000.
20 grand. Yeah, it's like it's if my wife loves the house, I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it work, because even on the low end of that at 2%, I got to come up with an extra $16,000 if they're not willing to pay you at all.
Right. Keep in mind, though, every buyer is in the same boat. So if a seller refuses to pay, then what's going to happen is every the vast majority of buyers are going to be looking at a home like you like you are, they're going to have to deal with the same stuff. That is why most of the time the seller is still continuing to pay. Most of the time, if they are not offering a co-broke fee, which is what we called it for years, then we can ask for that amount either as a closing cost concession, or we can ask them to pay that fee on behalf of you. I'm never going to be the reason that you don't get a house. I'm so confident of how this works. If for some reason they just flat out refuse to pay our fee, then we're going to have a conversation about it because I know you don't have all that money.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I was going. It's like obviously you deserve to get paid for your time, and I totally get it. But if I'm gonna be tight and I'm not gonna be able to make things work, I would hate to miss out on a house because I don't have an extra 16 to 24 grand laying around, and trying to figure out how we're gonna make it work. And because we don't have any family here, we don't have any extra funds, any extra money, none of that.
Got it. So your only option, we're going to either have to go through this and have transparent communication, right? Like every other buyer with their agent, except I feel that I communicate a lot better than the vast majority of agents, which is why we're having these conversations. But if you go directly to the seller agent, who's an experienced professional negotiator, they're representing the seller. All of the things that we talked about on those checklists, the seller's agent has no obligation to tell you any of it. They have to treat you fairly and honestly. But if you go directly to the listing agent in a market like this, then they're going to crush you. They're working for the seller. So I would say let's just take this one step at a time. The
Okay.
vast majority
All
of the
right.
time, the listing agent's going to pay us. If on the off chance they say, no way, we're not paying a dime, we're not willing to pay Will's brokerage anything, well, then I'll let you make a decision at that point if you want to move forward or not. And I'm not going to interfere with you. This isn't going to be something that's going to come up most of the time. But if it does, then I'll either let you out of the representation agreement or we'll figure something out. We're not going to get into a screaming match over it. And I'm not,
Okay.
and I already know how you feel. But unfortunately, if you want an agent in your corner, this is how it works.
All right. All right. I think that sounds fair enough. As long as you're open to kind of, working it out with me and figuring out how to put this together essentially.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to suddenly turn into a different person. I mean, I've got 275 reviews on Google. If it turns out that I'm just lying to you, I don't make a dollar until it closes. I'm not making any money up front. So it makes no sense for me to exaggerate how things are working or downplay the real effects of the marketplace and then have you be disappointed at the end and give me a bad review. I don't get paid. You hate me. That's not a win for me.
Okay. Fair enough.
But if you want to work with a buyer agent, you're going to have to sign a representation agreement. You're going to have a conversation around how they get paid, and it's not going to be any different than this.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Okay.
you get to the point where you just are banging your head against the wall, and the way I described how it was going to pan out, it doesn't work out that way, well, then we'll have a discussion about it because I'm not going to hold you guys up.
Okay. Fair
Is that
enough.
cool?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Down here, we're checking a box saying you consent or don't consent to getting paid by both people. So there might be an opportunity where they say, well, we'll pay 1% and you pay 1%. There's lots of negotiations around how we get paid once we actually locate a house.
Okay.
Down here, buyer agent may terminate this agreement at any time by giving written notice to the other party. As I said, if we're not happy with each other, the backbone of this is going to be trust, but we do need to have a written documentation that spells out the actual details of the relationship. The rest of this stuff is just disclosures. This talks about if there's ever a dispute, how we handle it, that we don't have any responsibility for the condition of the house, which is why we're making sure you have a home inspection and do a final walkthrough. You understand this is the final agreement. Down here, we talk about fair housing. That's going to be on everything you sign.
Okay.
Fair housing statement. Down here, wire fraud. If anybody asks you for anything via email, don't give it to them. And that's pretty much it. So at this stage, based on what we've talked about, are you comfortable moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. Can
Okay.
I just read through it and
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
through it.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it out as we discussed, and I'm going to send it to you to sign through dot loop, or we can meet face to face, your call.
I think that loop would be just fine.
All right, great. Do you have any questions?
No, just give me like a little bit of time to just go through it and review it, and then I think we should be good to go.
So there we have it. That's my buyer presentation.
Cool. So you're gatekeeping the rest of the process with the agreement being signed. You need them to buy in first on the agreement, essentially.
And it's never a problem. It's never a problem because I explain, I mean,
Yeah,
on the
because my process is
outside,
a little bit different right now. Like my process is like, have the conversation, send them over to the lender. Now I'm putting the BAA and I set them up on a portal. Like those things happen literally all at once. So I think maybe moving forward now is I get the BAA, wait for them to sign it, then I make the lender introduction, then I set up the portal.
yeah, because if they're not hiring you, all of this stuff is part of your job. And the whole idea behind the checklist or a version of this checklist is that it keeps you on track. It takes less than an hour, 45 minutes, right? On Zoom or face to face. But what it does is it highlights all of the different steps and it gives you an opportunity to talk about all of the things you do in the transaction and the potential pitfalls that occur when you talk about mold and radon and all of that and negotiating inspections and possession after the closing. It's overwhelming for most buyers because it just is. So once they see you as being a clear path to navigate them through that, you're not going to have a lot of pushback over the compensation. And again, every one of us is going to be in this same boat. So it's not, if an agent out there says, well, because I hear a lot of this, well, there's going to be agents that'll just do it for $2,000 or $1,000. Fine. You go and string together 50 buyers in a year and make 50,000 gross. I mean, come on. And then you got to pay your brokerage. I mean, brokerages are going to have minimum requirements in terms of because of the liability, the liability itself. So I still think that the vast majority of listing agents are going to continue offering a co-broke fee. Nothing in that settlement says that they can't do that. It just simply says it can't be promoted in the multiple listing service. So we can still do exactly the same thing that we've been doing. And then we just explain to the buyer the 3 ways we get paid. You're going to pay us this fee up front or at closing. If not everybody has a transaction fee, we do. I deserve to get paid. And we've been getting 2.5%, 3% for sale by owners. For sale by owners don't want to pay either. Think about that. For sale by owners, and you're negotiating for sale by owner contracts, and the seller's agreeing to pay it on the contract, right? There's no difference. The mindset's the same. And by the way, the vast majority of the sellers that I've listed lately have not even paid attention to the details. I listed a house last night at 6%, and they had used Redfin before and paid a 1% listing fee.
Wow.
Right. So my point is, it's all based on the value. We have to find their pain. We need to elevate where we are in the process. Our role as being an influential professional who's at the center of the transaction. And if they see you that way, they're going to buy quicker. They're going to be more apt to listen to you. They're not going to look at you as a salesperson or a door opener. They're going to look at you as a trusted confidant. So there's tons of benefits around having this representation agreement. It formalizes the whole process. And
Yeah, and I noticed that the ones that aren't signing or aren't quick to sign are also the ones that aren't serious about actually getting something relatively within a reasonable time frame, aka the next month or two.
if they trust you, now keep in mind what we didn't talk about was how you got on that Zoom in the first place. So a lot of the trust was built already. They saw my reviews online, they called me from Google, or they were recommended by their parents or a friend or a workmate, right? So there's already going to be trust by the time you get them on the Zoom.
Yeah, 100%.
You got to build the trust before you get them there. right? So that's why I don't talk a lot about that. But like leading up to, like, I've been doing this 36 years. I've sold 3,000 houses. I'm a boring guy, but I can get you through this process. They trust you already. But once you go through the money with them on the representation agreement after you've created value,
Yeah, then it's a no-brainer.
it should be. There's going to be some that are going to say no. But I have been getting a version of that representation agreement signed for 29 years.
Wow. Okay.
29 years since 1995. All of my team agents have used it as long as they've been with me since 2001, because that's when I started my brokerage and started a team. And I talk to them about for sale by owners, and I say, the most important thing with a for sale by owner is you let me be the initial introduction. And let me explain why. It's psychological. If you call the for sale by owner and then they're excited because they've got a bona fide buyer calling them, and then you say, oh, by the way, I'll have my agent call you, they get deflated because they're like, wait, I thought we had you, and now they're deflated. By the time I call, they don't like me. They feel like I'm just some realtor trying to squeeze in. If I call the for sale by owner first, and I say, hey, Peter, are you the owner of the house on 123 Oak Street? You say, yeah. I say, by the way, I am an agent, not looking to list the house. I've got a buyer who's pre-approved. They want to see your house. Are you open to cooperating with buyer agents? Well, what does that mean?
So get this, ready? I can't even make this up. I gotta share this with you because this is so fitting on the recording. I started testing on how I'm going to do it. So and so has finished signing the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement.
You're using it already.
Yeah. I started throwing it out there, but this was a guy that I waited a week and a half to sign. Now he signed. That's why I asked you about the timeline. Now
Yeah.
I'm ready to rock and roll.
And did you go over compensation with him?
I did, but I didn't go through the agreement the way you have. I'm going to start implementing that. I just said, here's what the agreement's going to say. You want to go to number 5? That's the most important part. That's where the money's at. Okay, how much you're going to pay me. And then right before that is what I'm going to do for you, what you're going to commit to me. So we don't go out there cheating on each other. But if you want to terminate me at any given time, no harm, no foul. Just let me know either via email, text, phone call, voicemail, whatever that is, but at least give me the feedback because I've never been fired yet.
That's great. But I think if you go through the value first,
Yes. Yeah.
and you
So
have
so
it,
I did
people are visual. People are visual. So that's why I have the flyer. And for years, I just sit at the office and go through the flyer with them. And I go through those 2 checklists because then they're like filling their head with all these steps. And then you say, by the way, based on what we've gone through, is this a level of service you want? Do you want me to help you? And they
Yeah.
say, yes. I say, okay, great. Do you mind if we take a minute and go through some paperwork? It just spells out our relationship and how we get paid. And then I go through that. It's very easy. It's very easy because I've gone through the for sale by owner part for years. Make sure that I call the for sale by owner first, because when I call them, I've got something they want, a ready, willing, and able buyer. And as long as they net the amount that they need, they're willing to pay me. Well, sellers aren't going to suddenly change. You're going to have some sellers, some analytical people or professional salespeople that are going to think that they can just not pay the buyer agent anymore. The vast majority of humans aren't that way.
Yeah. I would agree.
The
No, this was
vast
cool.
majority of humans aren't going to be these hard charging people like you and me, boiler room type guys. Most people aren't that way. We have the personality of maybe 7 to 10% of the population. The rest, if you say, hey, if you're the listing agent, you say, hey, my fee's going to be X. Excuse me. By the way, I'm going to take part of that and pay it to a buyer agent. This is how it works now. Did you hear about the new changes? No. Well, let me explain it to you. Yes. Okay. Ask them if they've heard of the new changes and then have them describe to you what they think it means.
Yeah. That's a great one.
Because if they describe to you what they think it means, you want to find out ahead of time before you start telling them what they have to do. Hopefully this was helpful for everyone. Just get out there and start practicing it now between now and July. You're going to professionalize your business by using this.
Big time. Yeah. I'm seeing it now too. Like I said, the ones that sign the agreement are a lot more intentional and ready to go. The ones that don't dilly-dally and dick around, for the lack of better words.
Putting framework around the relationship. And when
Yeah.
they sign that, it's like, okay, we're a buyer now. You
Yeah.
know, it's like buyers that go to a car dealership. Tire kickers don't fill out credit applications.
Yeah.
The reason they give you the credit application is to confirm that you're ready to go. That's all they care about.
Yep.
And in our business, if you've got a buyer that, is agreeing to work with you and sign a representation agreement, they've already got a timeline in place now. They're not just like because they wouldn't have signed it otherwise. If they weren't thinking of moving for 6 or 12 months, they're not going to sign with you today.
That's right. That's what I mean. It's like people are a lot more intentional when they do sign. So
Exactly.
appreciate
Thanks, guys. I hope this was helpful.